So, what happens when the very work of bringing something back to life starts to drain the life out of you? It's a tough question. In this explainer, we're going to dive into a dissertation by Jacob Manatowa-Bailey that tackles this head on. And it's not just about burnout, it's about a really powerful new way of thinking about healing and revitalization.
This whole exploration checks off with this incredibly honest and really vulnerable admission from the author himself. After 25 years in the field, a lifetime of dedication, he just hit a wall. And this isn't some abstract academic problem. No, this is a deeply personal crisis. And it really sets the stage for everything we're about to talk about.
And that brings us to the central paradox here. The word revitalize literally means to put new life into. So how on earth can this amazing, mission-driven, absolutely essential work lead someone to a point of total collapse? This question forces us to look beyond just, being tired. There's got to be something deeper going on.
Okay, so to really get the answer, we first have to appreciate the sheer weight of this kind of work. For decades, Jacob Manatowa-Bailey poured his life into Indigenous Language Revitalization. But then, as he puts it, he started to feel himself physically and emotionally just unraveling, and he couldn't quite put his finger on why.
Now, what's so striking about this is the emotion behind it. We're not just talking about being tired. This was a profound sense of shame, of failure. He felt weak, embarrassed. He was actually hiding his collapse because this work was so deeply tied to his very identity. It just goes to show you the immense personal toll this kind of burnout can take. But then, the author started to realize something really important. His burnout, it wasn't just his problem. It wasn't some isolated incident. It was actually a symptom of a much bigger systemic pressure, one that has its roots deep in a painful, shared history. And he actually gives this pressure a name. He calls it the trap of lessness. This is the absolute core concept of his work, and he uses it to explain this huge psychological weight that practitioners are carrying around. A weight that, he argues, comes directly from the ongoing legacy of colonization. Okay, and this is absolutely crucial. He defines colonization not as something that happened way back in the past, but as a living, breathing system that is still actively creating these feelings of deficiency. It's this constant pressure, It shapes your thoughts, your feelings, and even how your body physically responds to things today. So here's the first layer of that trap. It's a system that's basically designed to make you feel inadequate. It shines a spotlight on all the gaps in your knowledge, on everything that was lost, and then it attaches this heavy feeling of personal failure to all of it. And here's the really insidious part. The very system that created all that loss, it then turns around and shifts the blame for it onto the individuals and communities it harmed in the first place. It takes this huge systemic historical trauma and turns it into a source of deep personal and community shame. So what you have is this deep, pervasive psychological trap. And its whole purpose is to keep people feeling small, ashamed, and somehow responsible for things that were violently forced on their ancestors. And as he argues, escaping this trap, well, that's the very first step toward any kind of real healing. Okay, so if feeling less is the trap, then what's the way out? What's the antidote? Well, the author argues that the solution isn't trying to frantically fill some kind of void. No. It's about a fundamental pivot. It's about shifting the entire goal of the work. And that antidote is to feel whole. Now, this is a pretty radical reframing of the work, right? The goal has to shift from this frantic race to accumulate more language to a deliberate, thoughtful cultivation of personal and community well-being. So here's the bottom line. Success gets totally redefined. It's not about how many words you know or your fluency level anymore. Instead, success is measured by the health of the person doing the work. Are they finding safety? Are they building connection? Are they feeling whole in their work, like right now in the present moment? And this whole approach is grounded in the science of what the author calls embodied trauma. The big idea here is that historical trauma isn't just a memory or a story from the past. It's a physical reality that gets stored in our bodies, in our actual nervous systems, and it affects how we react to stress today. And this is exactly why that shift to the present moment is so incredibly important. See, your thinking brain, it can tell the difference between past, present, and future. But for the body that's holding on to trauma, there's only now. The threat always feels immediate. The danger feels like it's happening right now. So with this goal of feeling whole and knowing the challenge of embodied trauma, how do you actually do this?
Well, the great thing is, the author doesn't just diagnose the problem, he offers a really practical toolkit for building a more sustainable practice.
So he breaks it all down into 4 key skills. Think of them like the pillars for a sustainable practice. First up is internal awareness. That's just learning to notice the physical signs of stress in your own body. Then comes reflection, which helps you understand why you're reacting the way you are. That new awareness then gives you the power to start setting boundaries to protect your time and energy. And finally, it's all about creating systems to turn all of this into consistent, reliable habits.
And you can probably see how these skills all build on each other, right? I mean, you can't really reflect if you don't have awareness, and it's tough to set good boundaries if you haven't done that reflection. Together, they create this integrated system for making self-care not just an afterthought, but a central, non-negotiable part of the work itself. So, when you put all these pieces together, what you get is a totally new framework for the future of revitalization work. It's one that's grounded not in a feeling of crisis, but in a feeling of healing. And that, as the author puts it, creates a whole new kind of hope. And that brings us right back to the central thesis, the absolute core message here. The antidote to feeling less isn't about being more or knowing more. The path to healing isn't some endless, frantic race. It's the journey inward, to reclaim a sense of wholeness that was taken away. I mean, think about it. This shift completely transforms the nature of the work. It stops being this source of constant stress, this race against a ticking clock, and it becomes a potential source of deep personal healing. The work itself can become part of the antidote. And this is really the ultimate takeaway. The most valuable resource in language revitalization, it's not a dictionary, it's not a grant, it's the life force of the practitioners themselves. So protecting that life force, that's not selfish, it's the absolute fundamental requirement for the entire movement to succeed. So we're left with this final, really powerful question. By putting the practitioner's well-being at the very center, this work suggests a radical new idea. What if the most important thing we need to revitalize is ourselves? Maybe before we can bring new life to a language, we first have to learn how to sustainably nurture and protect our own.